On the part of the Senate, the joint session is hereby called to order.
On the part of the House of Representatives, the joint session is called to order.
1 year ago today, I stood here before you, setting forth the plans that we have to improve our economy, bring jobs to our people, improve the ease of doing business, recalibrate our educational system to adapt to the new economy, lower and rationalize energy costs, boost agricultural production, enhance healthcare, and continue social programs for the poor and the vulnerable. I know that the state of the nation is sound and is improving. Dumating na po ang bagong Pilipinas. Maraming salamat po.
One political commentator found it non-controversial, even safe. The second State of the Nation address of President Bongbong Marcos slightly touched on issues concerning security and was altogether mum on the territorial dispute over the West Philippine Sea. Still, we are not skipping this topic as we speak to Defense Secretary Gilbert Teodoro tonight on the Chiefs. Welcome to this edition of the Chiefs. I'm Ed Lingao. With me tonight in the studio, Robbie Lapay of One News, and of course, Luchi Cruz Valdez, the head of News 5. Chiefs, happy SONA.
Magandang gabi.
Yeah, SONA Day.
Long day for the both of you, especially.
For all of us.
Hindi, pero kaya, let me ask you, were there any surprises? Kasi kayo yung toka doon kanina eh.
It was surprising that it wasn't very surprising. You know, there was not much shock value. But then, I am also not surprised because President Bongbong Marcos has been by and large
That's become
staid
style, eh, di ba?
and
That's become
sober
style.
in the way he handles.
Avoid controversy.
Yes.
Yes.
Wala, napaka-controversy averse niya.
Sa akin, it's surprising in that he appeared to have avoided
Certain things.
several measures, bills, and policies that I would have thought he would have wanted to push very strongly.
Like what?
Well, for example, yung ROTC. I know it's pending.
He would have wanted,
No, but
not
that's
him.
VP Sara
Not him,
Duterte's,
di ba?
But
advocacy.
that's also part of I mean, that's also part of the coalition's push before.
Yeah, continuity, unity.
I mean, he was also seen as part of that group that was pushing for that, especially after the legacy of his father.
Yes. But there were certain things also, I mean, ako lang, ang take ko, I'm with Luchi on this. Diba? Parang, I'd never really associated with him. ROTC in particular, no? I always associated with Sara Duterte. And then, beyond that, there were things that were even made more explicit in his difference with President Duterte, di ba? In particular, the war on drugs. Di ba?
Yes.
New face.
He had already started saying different things, taking on a different tone.
Right.
But this time talagang made everything explicit na iba na to.
Iba yung approach, tsaka hindi na siya major landmark, di ba, platform of any kind.
Community-based treatment and rehabilitation.
Yes, diba?
But I suppose
Rehab.
more than that, the illegal drug campaign is taking on a new face.
Yeah.
Bagong mukha, as he said.
Yung lang, may tanong ako doon, di ba, sinabi niya, I will be accepting the resignation of those na law enforcers na complicit.
involved in.
Which
Again, when you think about it, di ba, parang where before, the language was,
I will protect you.
exactly, gawin niyo kung anong dapat yung gawin. Ito, di ba, parang very pointed na parang, you will be removed from service. I will not support you at all. Diba? Maghanda kayong makasuhan. So, yun.
And of course, the MUP proposal as well. As expected, that was pushed, although
But
hindi
that
ko
one,
detalye.
I really expected him to avoid it. Kasi, very, very sensitive. Especially for a president, diba?
Yeah, but he made a personal push before.
no
a few
effect
months ago.
naman
So
daw eh.
you have no choice as the one who made the push, very, very publicly push. For
Diba?
this.
Pero yun nga yung question dun eh.
As always, the
How
devil
can you
is
push something like that with no
effect.
effect?
to the people, to the stakeholders right now. Oo nga.
Yeah.
As always, the devil is in the details, di ba?
Yes.
Magkakaalaman tayo.
Because somebody's gotta give. Somebody, whether it's the new entrants or whether it's the retirees themselves or the current pool. I mean, somebody's gotta give it.
Not unless somebody was careless with the
Or
wording of the
Finance
speech.
Secretary Benjok, no? Di ba? Ano?
Not unless somebody was careless with the wording in the speech, di ba?
Sabi nga ni Professor Contreras kanina, sabi niya, it should be a rallying cry. SONA should be a rallying cry. You're trying to get people behind you. So yes or no? Sabi ko, do you think that's a rallying cry? I think the speechwriter did not make it. Si speechwriter. So anyway.
But in the end, diba, it's the president himself or herself who makes the final call on what goes in and what stays out, and how it's worded in the speech.
I know a lot of people who stayed up and stayed tuned, just trying to listen for one or two phrases, di ba?
that
Naipasok
will-
kaya, babanggitin kaya.
Yes.
And for them, that really is what a SONA is. It allows you to divine the direction and the priorities and, di ba?
Yeah.
What this
On the other
president
hand,
wants.
On the other hand, the fact that in the last SONA, in his first SONA, di ba, he made no mention of certain policy decisions he made, like the Maharlika Investment Fund.
Wala pa yun.
Nobody saw that coming. Di ba?
Nakaisip na ba nun yan?
Ganon
Wala
eh.
pa, baka mukhang
Kaya
pag-decide,
nga
hindi niya pa
which
naiisip yun.
means nga that even though he may not have mentioned certain things now, it doesn't mean that they won't ever come up or they won't ever be considered.
Saka baka kasi parang bagong Pilipinas yan eh. Biglang a year after taking office, let's change that.
Yeah, that's another thing to discuss, and we'll probably be discussing it in the coming days. We'll also talk about some things that were there in the first SONA and parang hindi na binabanggit ngayon, hindi na pinag-uusapan. Land Use Act, and
Yes,
one
yung
of
Land
the
Use
things that
Act.
wala na, and that was very well received the
Oo.
first time he said it.
Oo, right.
But in previous congresses naman, whenever somebody brings it up, a president brings it up, palakpakan sila pero hindi naman gumagalaw.
So the applause is not a measure of...
It's not. Parang, pause na. Tumigil at palakpak.
Kau naman. Meron ding mga nagustuhan yung mga congressman.
No, I'm not speaking about this particular president, but it's often the case in most other presidents din naman eh. Pause, palakpak. Anyway, of course, tonight we speak to Defense Secretary Gilbert Teodoro. That's after this break. The Chiefs will be right back.
Welcome back, the Chiefs, and as promised, we have with us tonight Department of Defense Secretary Gilbert Teodoro. Good evening, sir. Welcome back to the Chiefs.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Robbie, Lucci, and Ed. Good evening.
Magandang gabi po. And if you don't mind, I'll start with this because on the one hand, on the first time we interviewed you, literally on your first day as the new Defense Secretary, you said this was in fact the very first thing the President told you to take care of. And then kanina, very explicit, we thought it might be an elephant in the room, but the President certainly referred to it, the MUP, the pension fund for our military and uniformed personnel. What does he mean when he says na mangyayari to, we will do it, at the same time with the assurance that there will be no effect to people, to the stakeholders who are very, very concerned about how precisely this is going to be implemented?
Well, he knows that creating a retirement system and a pension system takes a transition period. And you can't just make it happen overnight. And so, to cause the least financial burden and displacement as possible for those that are in the service right now, it needs to be transitioned very gradually. No? So that's what basically he meant. And I'm at liberty to speak only about the progress we've made with my constituency, which is the Armed Forces of the Philippines. We are ready, just subject to a few more inputs that we need to set in motion the creation of an AFP retirement trust fund. The hardest part of this is to clean all the titles of the disposable properties of the Armed Forces of the Philippines and the retirement and separation benefit system, as well as other sources of income that we can place into the trust fund that we can seed. And I have an idea. It's like a pera law, the retirement law in the civilian, that you have a fund custodian and a fund manager. And definitely on the AFP side, the benefits that retirees receive shall not be diminished and their status will not be replaced. They will not be substituted with any other system. Now, for entry level, they will have to contribute to a fund. And it is also good for them because it introduces them to the idea of saving for their future. Now, for those in the service, we will have to transition slowly by way of gradual contributions and see what level their net take-home pay shall be that they have adequate and commensurate salaries. The hardest thing to do here actually is to create the trust fund. And that's what I'm working very hard to do, to clean up all the titles of all disposable properties to seed the fund. And this is for the AFP only. I cannot speak for the other uniformed services. They are also undergoing consultations and work with their pensions. Definitely the burden on the government finances, if nothing is done, if the President chose, I'll leave it until the end of my term without doing anything, the government will not implode at that time, but still it will not cure a problem, and the President feels the need to solve this problem of higher pension burdens during his term.
Okay. The need for a transition, I think you and many people have communicated that very well, and I think people understand it. Hindi naman pwedeng bigla-biglaan. There has to be, as much as we can afford, a soft landing to this. But on the other side of that is precisely, as you also alluded to, the reality of an urgency to this. Yes. So that's why the qualifier, as much as possible. So when we talk about a transition phase, what time period are we looking at right now?
A reasonable period would be 10 to 15 years with a gradual reduction in burdens. And when you have a retirement fund, sometimes there are ups and downs. Hopefully, there are more ups than downs when you manage the fund so that there would be no need for GAA support. We want it to be as self-sustaining as possible. However, the reality is it may not. But then again, the financial burden to the government is reduced. Now, in the idea of contributions, this is not new to soldiers because they already had 5% contribution levels for the RSBS before the program was discontinued. And they are they are willing to contribute, depending, of course, on the age and the proximity to their retirement. I mean, it doesn't make sense for somebody with 3 more years to go or 4 more years to go to let this person contribute when if he's invested the best part of his life towards something that he should have received and looked forward and worked hard for. So these details should come about by way of a mechanism that we devise where there will be in the trustees of the fund some form of representation of the retirees, the DND, and the Armed Forces of the Philippines, and the financial managers on the other side. That's on the custodial side. But on the running of the fund, naturally an experienced government fund manager that follows prudential standards and best practices and is vetted also by stringent financial controls by the DOF, and perhaps the BSP is in order.
Sir, we wanted to ask you to qualify or to clarify what the President said kanina, specifically with the wording that he used. He was talking kasi about the need to ease the transition to the new pension system to guarantee, and I put this in quotes, to guarantee no effects are felt by those in the uniformed services. That kind of intrigued us. Kasi when he said no effects, that's quite different from minimizing the effects. What you're saying now is costing the least burden to those who are in the service. Those, I suppose, have two different things.
We can achieve both. If it's no effect, we can have it by way of allowances and not base pay. Not base pay increases to answer for inflation. No?
So you mean reducing from the base pay? Is that what you mean?
No. Increasing allowances for
okay,
rather
babawi
than
doon sa allowances.
Oo, ibawi na lang doon para hindi mag-increase yung base pay, hindi rin mag-increase ang pension burden because the pension burdens are based on base pay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay. Yeah. Sir, the other thing is this. You were talking about, for the active service, a gradual, I suppose, increase in the contributions. What I understood from...
No. I wasn't talking about a gradual increase in contributions. We would have to determine who in the active service should be made to contribute and what rate. That is still to be determined. Because it doesn't make sense for somebody who's already invested, let's say, 28 years, 29 years in the service to let them contribute.
Okay, sir. Well, I bring that up kasi when we spoke to PNP Chief Acorda, of course, that's with the PNP, ang sasabi naman niya then was 5% still too high for at least 60% of the police service. This is the police service. It's masak para sa kanila masyadong 5%. They were proposing some sort of an equation like 1, 3, 5. For the first year, 1%, going up to 3%, and then going up to 5%. Versus yung sa DOF proposal, at least the last I saw, was a 5% going up to later 9% as we go along.
9%, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Sa amin, it's even, it can, if we're going to talk about percentages, they even added on insurance coverage, which the MBAI can go. So we can even go lower on percentages. But nevertheless, the instruction of the President is that it should be with no financial displacement so we can ameliorate it with GAA support. Just as long as that fund is built up. Now, I'm only ready to talk about the AFP and not the PNP and the other uniformed services.
Of course, sir. Sir, Pablo, sir. So if you do make adjustments dun sa allowances, and then of course add on or peg on contributions dun sa basic pay, that's fine for their take home. Pero in the end, once they retire, they will feel the effect.
No, they won't. They won't. We'll make sure that when they retire, they will get commensurate benefits, no? The same as possible, no diminution when they retire.
Pero sir, kasi di ba, if you cut, yeah, okay, I understand what you mean now.
Kasi contributory na nga
Yes, sir.
rin, Ed. Kaya nga, kung contributory, mas lalong dapat nga may, commensurate ang benefits, no?
So in other words, they will be given allowances, so that's not part of the base pay, right?
Yeah.
And so they will have room for savings, I mean, in a way. And at the same time, they will now contribute, and when they retire, they'll essentially get the benefits that's due them.
Yeah, wait, that's for entry level, Lucia. For those
okay,
in the service now, we haven't determined yet. Yeah,
Right,
because
right.
that's changing the rules of the road
Yes.
midstream.
I
So we
guess
have
the
to get a
question-
consensus also
Right.
for that, no? Because the end goal really is to reduce the amount that comes from the GAA that goes to pensions.
Exactly,
So we can
right.
spend the amount from another thing, but we can't do that overnight because if we create a trust fund, it has to mature before you can draw on it.
Yeah, but the question... Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess,
Go ahead.
sir, the question is whether this will be enough to save the system from what they say is a collapse, possibly in the next 5 to 7 years, if we continue with this. And at the same time, that if we're going to apply it only to the entrance, for us to feel the effect of this overall will take so much longer. In other words, we're still going to suffer in the short term financially, yes?
I don't think we're going to suffer financially. We do suffer our opportunity losses to use the money for something else.
Okay.
No?
Yeah.
And for us, in my constituency, the AFP, we only have 144,000 pensioners. So that is a very manageable amount. Yet, we want a standalone system. Why? Right now, there is nothing under the law that prevents Congress. Of course, it's a very politically risky or if not disastrous decision
Yes.
to say, I'm going to halve your pension rates. Because it's a GAA annual outlay.
Correct.
Now, if it is a fund, a trust fund, nobody can touch it anymore.
Okay. Yes. Yes.
And your benefits are guaranteed.
Okay. And they can make it grow because it's a fund. Okay, we'll leave
Hopefully.
the... Yes.
Hopefully.
Right, right. Okay, we will leave the MUP issue.
Teka, pahabol muna ako.
Okay, go ahead.
Sir, sorry, medyo slow ako. Numbers ito eh. So, please bear with me here. Okay.
Pati ako mabagal, kaya structure nga ang pinag-uusapan.
Sir, ito lang. I'm just wondering. So, we're talking about the possibility of, contributions from salaries. Okay, so bawas bali dun sa matitake home niya dun sa salary. Pero dadagdag natin sa allowances
Doon
para
sa
ma-offset.
entry level, ah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Doon sa entry level.
Yes, sir. So, para ma-offset, dagdag sa allowance, bawas dun sa salary.
Actually, yung mga offset, kung i-require na mag-contribute, those that are in the service, doon mag-offset. Pero entry level, talagang contribution niya.
Yes, sir. Tapos, in the end, yung kanilang retirement, basically, walang galaw yun. Di ba?
Siyempre,
Walang galaw.
because their base
Walang
pay
galaw.
remains the same.
Kung anong indexation, ganun pa rin.
Right.
Yes, sir. Well, yeah, forgive me if I'm a little slow with this. Pero, hindi ba naging parang zero net yung yung nangyari? O walang gumalaw dito, walang gumalaw doon?
Hindi, kasi sa entry level mo na nga inaano sa entry level, doon mo na
Pinupunuan mo na
doon
ng
mo na
level.
binabawasan. Tapos ang mga retirees natin na pasakop ay pabawas na ng pabawas dahil may mga nag-optional naman eh.
Yeah.
So bawas na 'yon sa sistema.
And also,
Tapos
Secretary...
nagki-cleanse tayo ng pension list at hindi naman tayo our force structure is not getting any bigger. At nagki-cleanse tayo ng pension list. So paliit actually ang actual pensioners, no?
Yeah.
Right.
In the meantime,
Nutrition.
on the funding side, as you mentioned, it's not just about figuring out contributions from new entrants into the military. You mentioned, of course, there are also assets, there are also properties that we're trying to clean up, the titles and so on, para pwede rin natin i-factor in yan.
Hindi, yan ang main factor.
Kaya nga.
Siyang main factor, Robbie.
Yeah, so talk us through that. How big is this main factor potentially?
Ang market value sa RSBS ngayon is more or less about 40 billion ng kanyang assets, no? And we hope to raise an equal, if not bigger amount in disposable real properties of the armed forces that are not earmarked for strategic basing. Hopefully, we can gain double the same amount. Plus, we plan to put the earnings from the BCDA into seeding the fund every year rather than to modernization. Because modernization really should be a burden of each and every Filipino, no?
Of the budget, in short. Yes. Yes.
Okay, sige. That obviously, of course, it triggers more questions, but we will also be asking other questions, not just about the MUP and all of the other questions that derive from that. We will continue this conversation after a break. The Chiefs will be right back.
The pension of the military and the uniformed personnel is as important, as urgent, and as humanitarian as that of all other civilian Filipino employees. Efforts are underway to make it fully functional and financially sustainable. Our independent foreign policy, a friend to all and enemy of none, has proven effective. Our existing bilateral and multilateral trade agreements, notably within the ASEAN framework, and with Japan and with Europe, and allow us to leverage our competitive advantages and reap economic benefits. We will continue to forge more of these international partnerships that will lead to a more balanced trade strategy and a healthier economic position. Isa sa mga dahilan ng pagtaas ng presyo ay ang mga smuggler, mga hoarder at mga nagmamanipula ng presyo ng produktong agrikultural. Hinahabol at ihaabla natin sila Pandaraya ang kanilang ginagawa. Unscrupulous law enforcers and others involved in the highly nefarious drug trade have been exposed. I will be accepting their resignations. We cannot tolerate corruption or incompetence in government. It took a whole-of-nation effort to achieve this immediate recovery from our pandemic slump. Unity was what made us rise once more. Nagsisimula pa lamang tayo. Ang pagbangon ng ating bayan ay magpapatuloy pa.
And thank you for staying with us here on the Chiefs. And still with us is Defense Secretary Gilbert Teodoro. Sir, matanong lang kita before we move to foreign relations stuff about the ROTC. There was no mention of ROTC in the President's SONA today. Does that mean that it's not an issue for him anymore, or that he doesn't intend to push it, or how do you read it?
No, it's already work in progress anyway. And we're working also with the Senate on it. However, on my own personal take, I think on our part, we also have to determine the adequate force structure of the reserve force. What is the size? How many do we need? And it is also something we'd like to push bona fide, because we need about 2,000 second lieutenants in the Philippine Army alone. So we need to staff competent and adequately motivated young adults to fill this position. Now, given that there is a maximum size of a reserve force structure that the AFP needs and can absorb, it has always been, by the way, a proposition for the armed force to have a small active duty force and a large reserve force from Commonwealth Act number 1, I believe. However, right now, we really have to determine how many of these trainees we can properly train and we can properly absorb in the reserve force. Now, even the nomenclature, probably it may be more appropriate to name it National Military Training, because if you say Reserve Officer Training Course, you say officer, there's an expectation, particularly if you're a college graduate, right?
That's true.
Secondly, the concept of national service is not merely through military service.
Okay.
Concept of national service is equally important in the civil defense role. Because having said that there is a maximum reserve force that is ideal for your country, civil defense is equally important in times of crisis, in disaster risk reduction, disaster response, and rehabilitation. And this probably should also be inculcated in the educational system, because it goes directly down to the barangay level and to the community where you live. Your fire protection, fire brigades, emergency medical technicians, your I don't know if the practice is still going to be applicable like in World War II, your air raid wardens, your first responders. And this is actually community-based. And I'd like to see an amalgamation of both civil defense and ROTC.
Okay, so
there
if
are
this
pending bills right now, and it's a work in progress.
Okay, so if this is a work in progress, quite clearly it's just in phase 1 or in the early parts of phase 1.
Because there have been several hearings already on the Senate before my time. And I'm just going to introduce a twist or a nuance into it to make it more encompassing.
Responsive, yes.
Yeah, but Mr. Secretary, so I mean, I'm getting the impression that it's actually closer to NSTP.
Right.
Diba? We're just
Something like that.
Which is an option
something like
right
that.
now open
but
to
then-
college
Because we-
students. Yes.
But then it also suggests, if I'm hearing you right, there is room to rationalize both the size of this implementation as well as the different tracks of service that can
Right.
be, because I think the main thing
the-
that we were proceeding from is not just military. The other thing we were proceeding from was the question of mandatory.
Right.
Yes, definitely. Even the National Defense Act contains a provision, it was pointed out to me earlier, that any adult up to the age of 65 during time of war can be conscripted to the military, no? But why will you conscript somebody if they're not going to be usable and they're actually more able to police their communities in time of civil defense?
Yeah.
Any organization, whether you have a BCP organization, a private organization with a BCP, a standby force, has its limits. And we'd like to see where that limit will go through creating also on our side a notional reserve force structure. No? Secondly, if the object is to instill communities a public service and some form of disciplinary mechanism to inculcate in our youth, it should be a balance of both. Because both are important.
But Mr. Secretary, if I just want to know if this is actually an explicit thinking also, not just a matter of knowing the limits of the needs of the military and its absorptive capacity. You're also acknowledging, in effect, that
I think
if we go beyond the absorptive capacity, this goes the other way. We're wasting resources.
We will not be able to absorb them. This might as well train them in another disciplinary method for public service.
And while we're at it, there's no point in limiting it also to males. I mean, if you're going to do community service, I mean, if that's what you're going to train students
and actually,
for, right?
the military now is not anymore. There are no gender divisions anymore. You have female pilots, female combatants already.
Right. Yeah. So moving on to foreign relations, sir. First of all, your reaction to the visit of former President Duterte to China, especially his sit-down meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping.
Well, it was a private visit, and track to diplomacy and engagements are always welcome. It's just like President GMA being the chairman of the Boao Forum, President Ramos being the chairperson of the Boao Forum. Any engagements aside from our formal bilateral engagements are certainly welcome. Insofar as my department is concerned, it does not affect in any way our stand towards building up a credible deterrent capability. No? The former president is a former president and is entitled to due respect in that regard.
But, sir, was the government aware? And for that matter, what should be the protocol? What is the protocol for a former president?
There is no protocol for a private citizen and a former president. No. We have the liberty of movement, and there is no protocol because the former president was not there in an official capacity.
No protocol means therefore no information for government. You were not aware that this was going to happen?
No. We really don't keep tabs on former president, and it being a private visit, more so.
Also, there was this opinion by Stratbase that the visit may have undermined the position of President Bongbong Marcos vis-a-vis our relations with the U.S. And also with China.
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. The president has his own independent foreign policy, and that stands firm. And that foreign policy is enunciated by the president himself and Secretary Manalo. No other people enunciate it except the President and Secretary Manalo.
Mm-hmm.
In the SONA today, the President's words, and may I quote, were, "We will protect our sovereign rights and preserve our territorial integrity in defense of rules-based international order. This is a declaration that, well, he's standing with the United States in regard to the West Philippine Sea. How do you think China
No,
will take to this?
Luchi. We're standing on our own, basically. We're standing on our own based on UNCLOS and customary international law. We're not standing with the United States in this because the United States is not a signatory to UNCLOS. We are. And that was the basis of the arbitral award, was the junking of the 9-dash line. And that is a Philippine award.
Well,
So we're standing on our own interests here.
But was this in a way a rib or a call or a shout out to China that we're going to stick with the UNCLOS decision, the arbitral tribunal decision?
Well,
and we're going to
even
stand our
President
ground and-
Duterte,
yeah.
in his penultimate year, I think, or ultimate year, before speech before UNGA, his only speech before the General Assembly, really gave the commitment that the arbitral award is something that, and our rights are something that cannot be frittered away with the passage of time or the changes of administration. And he even appealed for a more proactive and more equitable United Nations structure so that the rights of the small nations can be protected. So it is a continuum, basically. Of course, foreign policy depends on each and every president. Each and every president has his or her own way of dealing multilaterally and bilaterally. So it's not a shift. Basically, it's Philippine interests coming first,
and this
depending on the situation.
Okay. And this stand on rules-based international order does not conflict with our stand on the ICC now that we've decided through President Marcos
No.
that we will disengage
because,
completely from
No,
ICC.
because the ICC has already been jumped, and we feel that we have the capability to do our own independent and impartial investigations, and justice can be best had here. Rather than the ICC, might as well just strengthen our own justice systems. In the case of the West Philippine Sea, Luchi, that is why UNCLOS is very important, because we fought tooth and nail to have archipelagic doctrine declared as international law under UNCLOS, as far as I understand it.
Sir, let me broaden the discussion a bit to include the EDCA and as well relations with Taiwan in whatever form it may take. In a visit by our colleague Ana Marie Pamintuan to Taiwan 2 or 3 weeks ago, she had a chance to talk to the Foreign Minister of Taiwan, Mr. Joseph Wu, and Minister Wu was saying that was suggesting the possibility of a security cooperation agreement between the Philippines and Taiwan.
Outright, we
I can
cannot.
see you shaking your head. I suppose, but I need to ask this anyway. Of course,
Sure.
we are aware of the one China policy and all that, but given how things are developing between the Philippines and China, and the way things are developing between Taiwan and China, what's the possibility of this happening?
That is a zero possibility happening, because really that the relations between China and Taiwan and its status as an international body is an internal question between China and Taiwan. We do not have diplomatic relations with Taiwan, only with the People's Republic of China. Now, we have treaty alliances with other countries such as the United States, who are committed to our credible deterrent capability upgrade buildup. And the way we do that and with whom we ally is our business, in the same vein that we do not interfere with the internal questions of China. And a security arrangement with Taiwan would be a blatant disregard of that core issue of China.
So no possibility at all of any kind of
No.
security agreement. I won't say treaty, but
No.
agreement of any sort
No.
with Taiwan.
Secretary, I'll throw in a new question also. Again, from the SONA, both on what he said and did not say. Apart from mentioning an amnesty offer to rebel returnees, there was really no other mention of counter-insurgency or, for that matter, peace talks. Are we reading too much into this, or what should we read into this in terms of how you're going to engage or not engage with insurgents?
Well, the insurgency is really waning already. As a matter of fact, I think there's only one region where fronts have not been cleared. And one of the factors that prohibit those who may want to surrender bona fide rebels and not those pursuers or those posing as rebels is the fact that they may have standing warrants of arrest against them. And so this is something that the president has thought about and will work out an amnesty proclamation. The details, of course, we will know the final details when it is submitted to Congress for ratification or concurrence. Now, given that, that is a signal that there will be no peace talks.
Yes. On another matter, let me ask you about the down payment that we made to Russia on those choppers that the Duterte government had purchased, and which we now apparently want to cancel the procurement thereof. How are we going to do about it? What's the status?
No, I wouldn't want to have canceled the procurement because these are good helicopters. As a matter of fact, the United States even bought them for Afghanistan. However, we are at a legal impasse where we cannot proceed with further payments because of sanctions. Now, the banner was, I wanted to cancel, wanted the return. However, what I truly said was we are studying all our legal options as to the best solution to the problem. And there are several options that we can put forward based on negotiations with the party. And the matter we have elevated already to the Office of the Solicitor General and the Department of Justice for proper legal guidance already on what options we may take without stopping us from choosing any of these options. I myself am really saddened because it is a capable helicopter even used by the United Nations. No? However, because of the sanctions, we can't proceed. So we have to find the best way to resolve the situation as quickly as possible.
So, sir, it's not a cost efficiency issue. It's not an issue of quality of the product.
No,
it's
not at
just
all.
an issue of the
not at all, because
The
the best
sanction.
evidence is it was even purchased by the United States for
Yes, sir.
Afghanistan.
Yes, sir.
And it has proven its worth in hot and high operations and even in cost. Because its nearest competitor probably, which can do a little bit more than it does, is more than 3 times its value.
Okay, can you educate us on the implications of proceeding with this sale?
Proceeding with?
This sale. I mean, if we continue with it, because you're saying in effect that
we
it's
can't
part of the...
continue,
Yes.
Lucci, because we can't pay for it. Meaning to say the contract is in US dollars and we cannot pay in US dollars.
Because of the sanction.
Because the company is sanctioned by the US.
Oh, I see. So it's not
See?
even because we're aligning ourselves with...
No.
I
It's because
see.
the company is sanctioned.
I
and we
see.
cannot proceed to make further payments.
Okay, that's
because the
clear now.
contract is denominated in US dollars.
But, sir, is it possible to put it in suspended animation for the
Exactly,
meantime?
and
I
then
mean,
claim
yeah.
And
later.
then we will really not know when the sanctions will end. And in the meantime,
That's the estoppel.
further payments,
Yeah.
we cannot allocate to other equipment because we cannot reprogram or
Right.
rebudget, and we still have a down payment of $1.something billion, which we can use.
I see, I
If
see.
or they can deliver whatever helicopters they have completely assembled for that amount. Those are all options that we can study. So the major obstacle here is we cannot pay because of the sanctions. and the contract is in US dollars.
It's the company that's.
It really is a sturdy helicopter.
Yeah.
I mean, they've been using it for,
It
for
is.
a long, long
I
time.
think, Ed, you've ridden in a lot of UN assistance to the country in response for disasters. These
Yes,
are
sir.
used,
It's quite
particularly in
cost-effective.
hot and
Sayang
ice.
pala,
understand.
no? Yeah.
And it can carry a large amount of troops
To replace
Troops and
the
cargo.
Huey.
and cargo, yes, and cargo as well.
Yeah.
So, yun. But, yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, that's all the time we have. Defense Secretary Gilbert Teodoro,
Thank
sir,
you, sir.
maraming
Thank you,
salamat
sir.
po sa inyo.
Thank you so much, and thanks again. I feel more confident before the Commission on Appointments now.
Salamat po.
Thank you.
That's it for the
Thank you.
Chiefs. We hope it was discussed. We'll keep the conversation going. Ako po si Robbie Alampay.
I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5.
I'm Ed Lingao. We are One News, all sides, all the time.